My personal awareness of disadvantage goes back to the 1940s, when my family lived in Limerick City. The nearest primary school for me was the model school. The school population was quite mixed, with some boys coming in from the country, some from working class areas of the city, some from very poor areas, and a tiny minority from wealthier suburbs. Differences were marked by accents, by quality of clothes, shoes, etc. But by and large, boys didn't form cliques, and we all played together in the schoolyard. However, away from school, it was clear that Limerick was a class-ridden city. With the exception of the Christian Brothers and a few other organisations, the institutional church associated itself completely with the wealthy, professional and commercial classes. The poor will always be with us was a pious reminder regularly delivered from the altar. For most of my life, it was Ireland's proud boast that 95% of the population was Catholic. Fee-paying Catholic schools like Laurel Hill Convent, the Jesuit College and Glenstall Abbey educated the children of the rich, ensuring the continuity of the Old Boys Club, posh accents, suitable social opportunities for finding marriage partners, and of course, business connections passing from generation to generation. From the foundation of the state, right up to the 1980s when it began to wane, the church exercised extraordinary power over every conceivable aspect of Irish life. If the exercise of that power had resulted in a more even, equal and just society, perhaps that may have been a partially justifiable factor. But unfortunately, the opposite was the case. Class distinction was fostered and perpetuated in every area of life controlled by church authorities. Starting with the church itself, diocesan clergy came from middle and upper income classes who could afford a secondary education for their children. This often entailed sending them to boarding schools. Boys and girls from lower income groups, on the other hand, were often educated free by the church to provide clergy for missions all over the world. In every diocese, primary and secondary education, private hospitals, industrial schools, the Magdalen laundries, as well as the most intimate aspects of people's social and personal lives, were controlled and regulated by the Catholic hierarchy, with very few exceptions. Overriding all of this were the hierarchy's blatant and often successful attempts to influence and dictate government policy on health, education and other fundamental issues at the highest ministerial levels. Their collective sense of self-importance in the control of Irish society knew no bounds. Whereas the scenario I have just described may be viewed now as a legacy issue following the near collapse of traditional Catholicism in recent times, nonetheless, the fact must be faced that if a genuine philosophy of Christianity and caring for the underprivileged had underpinned the lengthy reign of church power, then we would not have to deal with a level of poverty and disadvantage in Ireland which ranks with some of the worst in the developed world. There are huge areas in our towns and cities, largely defined by local authority housing, where generational disadvantage is so endemic that the inhabitants might as well be living on a different planet for what little they experience of a decent quality of life. One of my prime motivations in establishing the Irish Citizens Party is to initiate radical steps to change this picture forevermore. The process will extend to empowering people in these situations to get actively involved in local and national politics. I am primarily motivated to make this commitment because of the deep gulf that separates the haves from the have-nots in Irish society. Almost 100 years on from the 1916 rebellion, that gulf gets wider by the day. Tragically for so many, it is down to where a person is born as to whether he or she will have a reasonable living environment, a good education, personal development opportunities, and a good quality of life. The situation has existed in parts of Dublin and in other cities and towns for generations. One inevitable outcome of these divisions is that our prison population is largely composed of men and women who were reared in areas of massive disadvantage and social exclusion. Another tragic outcome is that tens of thousands of Irish citizens are doomed to lifetimes of inequality, with little or no hope of breaking the cycle of poverty and disadvantage. Speaking as one who gives thanks for my good fortune in being able to live life to the full in the location of my choice, I share the shame and guilt of being a member of an all too silent majority which has done little or nothing to end these inhumane divisions in Irish society. The ultimate loss to Ireland in every conceivable way, from the inability of tens of thousands of our people to reach anything like their full potential, is incalculable. But in 2013, bankrupt Ireland is at a turning point in its history. Whatever happens now, only one outcome is certain: things will never be the same again. There will be a huge social upheaval in our country. We can only hope that people's entirely justifiable anger and frustration will find an outlet in political and constitutional action. Anything else is too frightening to contemplate. On the other hand, if cool heads prevail, I believe that out of this crisis will emerge an opportunity to reinvent Irish society in fundamental ways. One essential part of that renewal must be the raising of the disadvantaged from the black hole of inequality they have occupied under all governments, past and present. A new party is needed to lead this renewal, as none of the existing parties have humanitarian policies anywhere near radical enough to carry out the task. Neither have they demonstrated any serious interest in doing so. The majority of Irish citizens, many of whom are now struggling to survive, have genuine compassion for their fellow citizens, forced by circumstances to spend their entire lives in deprived areas. But the tragic reality is that Irish people are well used to living with apartheid in housing when it comes to inequality. We might as well have 20-foot walls between the haves and the have-nots for all we see of each other. Out of sight, out of mind is the salve we apply to our collective conscience. Political leadership is desperately needed. I have complete faith in the humanity of the majority of the population to eliminate inequality from Irish society, if that leadership is forthcoming. In 1996, I set up the Quality of Life Association to bring like-minded people together for the purpose of radically improving the lives of disadvantaged communities. Though the task proved too great for a voluntary group at that time, our proposals for positive action remain equally relevant today and will inform much of the social policy of the Irish Citizens Party.